Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 427, Death of a Cyclist, directed by Juan Antonio Bardem, 1955. Now this film is a suspense thriller, and it starts off with a couple who is returning from a tryst that they have. They ran over somebody with their car, and it was a cyclist. And they spend the rest of the film trying to cover up or move on with their lives to cover this particular crime. Now the question is, what's the crime are they trying to cover up? In fact, what's very, very telling, in the very beginning, the title action is never explicitly shown. The only thing that you see is, in fact, this is shown in the cover. Try to reduce the glare, but I mean that's all you see. You don't even actually see the cyclist himself. You just see the mangled bicycle. And in fact, this happens in the very beginning, so this does not count as spoilers. She was the one behind the wheel, not him. And the whole film is this interesting sort of, okay, how good can we conceal this secret, and then thus leading there's this feeling of suspicion and paranoia that comes up, and particularly this one guy that says, you know, I saw what you did. And it gets everybody unnerved, and I'll explain a little bit about the characters since I don't want to keep it too vague. But the guy is a mathematics professor who's really kind of upset with his life. He actually got the position because of family connections, and he's like, my life used to be really exciting. And the woman with whom he's having the tryst is actually married to a very prominent politician, I believe, and so she's upper class, and so she's kind of used to all the writs, but at the same time she's also kind of dissatisfied. So everybody's kind of dissatisfied with their own lives. And by the way, the man who kind of sort of threatens both of them works as a piano player for some of the various parties that they hold, and he does this little thing where he's just like, I saw what you did. And there's kind of a bluff involved, or it's more or kind of, you know, playing a bluff. It's not really sure of how much she really knows, and then the other thing is it's what are you trying to cover up? Are you covering up the fact that, you know, that you killed this man, vehicular manslaughter, but still it results in a death, or are you just covering up the fact that you're having this adulterous affair? So it's this very interesting little kind of tango, as it were, and all of this is contemporary. All of this is contemporary for the film. This is in the middle of 1950s Spain, so Franco was firmly in power. So yes, there's also that aspect to it. So that's kind of the film in a nutshell. Now, the two big giveaways from this film is, one, this is another example of a suspense thriller done right. So if you are a fan of Hitchcock and Clouseau, this is another film where it's a suspense thriller genre. It's a suspense thriller done right, and again, it's done by a different director and in a different country. So it's one of those things where, I mean, you certainly want to learn from the masters. You certainly want to. There's certain go-to directors you want for certain genres, but if you want to see how it's also done and how those conventions can play out very well, that's another. It's another really good film. And again, it's interesting to kind of see the interactions play out. Which then leads into the other big positive, is that it is a nice commentary about the nature of morality. Now, this does not mean that morality is bullshit, or that it should be done away with, or that it shouldn't be done. In fact, I think a lot of the films that are considered advocating immorality are made by very moral filmmakers. They do believe in or they have a sense of morality, or they feel that morality is very, very important. But this is what I mean by it's a commentary on morality. What defines ultimately morality is what your values are. What is it that you value most? And that's what's going to make your morality either more sound or less sound. For instance, as I said, there's this notion of covering it up. We don't want anybody to know. But then the question is, what do you want? What do you not want people to know, and why? Again, the title event is not really made that big of a deal. It's certainly alluded to. It certainly is a motivator, but it's not the motivator. In fact, the main thing that I think both of them, and certainly certainly for the woman, is to cover up the fact that they're having an affair. Because if word came out that this affair happened, it would ruin her reputation. It would just throw everybody's life into an all upheaval. And then the other aspect is that covering up leads to other bad actions, and then it just keeps compounding. And it makes things worse and worse, and it just all kind of almost sort of goes to hell in a handbasket. And I think it's just because I think that's where the arbitrariness of morality comes from. It's what do you value? And what comes through is that I think what is valued, what tends to be valued, is social reputation, your social status. How will this make me look? If you've ever said that, then you have to really reconsider what your moral values are. Whereas one would think that if you have a society, and I think this is especially where the social commentary comes from, if this is supposedly a nation that prides itself in being Catholic and being through and through Christian, and I think the jury's still out about how much Franco really, really cared about the Catholic Church there, or any kind of Catholic values. But let's assume for the moment that was what he wanted Spain to be, through and through Catholic. Then what exactly is Catholic about any of this? especially the fact she killed somebody. Did she intend to kill somebody? No, but she was driving too fast, and she ended up killing somebody. And the only reason why he ended up dead is because they left him on the road. It's like, oh, we don't want to bother him because then it will expose us, and then, so they left him there to die. Whereas if they helped him, if they did the Good Samaritan thing, he might have lived, and we wouldn't have had this. But it's because of covering up one thing. Which is also this is another way of saying this, and this is very similar. It's what happens with lies. It's when you start lying to yourself, or you start lying to others. It then creates this snowball effect. And that's what you see throughout this whole film. It's this snowball effect where one thing leads to another, and then it just keeps compounding. Partly because you're making bad decisions. The other part of it is that there's a lot of misunderstandings that are made, and particularly, and that's what I was trying to say earlier about the whole bluff aspect, is it's when you make a threat of saying, I know what you did, then for the other side who knows that there's a secret, you kind of wonder, okay, what do you know? Is it the fact that you saw me hit the cyclist? Is it the fact that you know that I'm having this affair? It's like, what do you know? And then it just makes everybody on edge, and you're operating by what you know, and you end up making more mistakes, and it just ends up being lousy for everybody. in so many words. Again, I don't want to go into a whole lot of spoilers and everything, so, but that's what you see through this film. Now, there's another takeaway that I get from this film, and again, which was that while I certainly admire the work that was put into it, and there are some very creative edits that go on, the way that scenes go from one to the next. There's some fairly clever match cuts and really nice transitions that are made in there that moves it along. Well, I can definitely appreciate the film and everything that goes into it. This is another film where I don't feel like I was wowed by, or I feel like, wow, this is a great film. In fact, the reason why I got this film is because after seeing The Spirit of the Beehive, I became a little bit more interested in seeing Spanish cinema, particularly since Spirit of the Beehive came about at a time when where the Franco regime was nearing its twilight. I wanted to see something where it was definitely in the middle. It's like, what kind of cinema was going on in Spain during that time? And so that's what I was interested in, and that was a title that came up, or certainly Bardem was a director that came up, and I thought, okay, I want to get into that. But then at the end of it, I wasn't completely wowed by it. Again, I admired and appreciated more than I really loved it. But then in reviewing this again, it finally hit me about what exactly the Criterion Collection is. And in order for this to make sense, I'm going to get a little bit personal. And I'm going to relate to something that happened to me in relation to my alma mater. I attended the College of William and Mary, which is a great school to go to. It's on the level of going to an Ivy League school. And I remember during the orientation, and any William and Mary alumni that's watching this, if you certain years you will certainly remember this anecdote or this tale being told, and it was courtesy of the VP of Student Affairs, Sam Sadler, who would tell the incoming freshmen this, that going into William and Mary, or what constitutes a class at William and Mary is a lot of students who are in the top 2%. We are, like, all of us are in the top 2% of our respective high schools or wherever we were originally. So we've proven to be very smart, very bright, very dedicated, very vigilant, just in top form. So it's taking all of these 2% and you put them into this one little space. Now, the reason why he says this is that in high school we're used to being like this, and we're used to being the cream of the crop. Now we're in a situation where it's now been expanded. So we're all in this, all of us are in the top 2%, but not all of us can be in the top 2% at William and Mary. So everything is all spread out, and so you find out, there's several people who are better than you at certain things, and chances are you're not going to be used to that because you're so used to being on the top previously. But now you're in the situation where, like, everybody's on top. But then he says that, but he reassured us at the end of it, by the time you get out of this, by the time you graduate from William and Mary, you then automatically go back to the top 2%. So you go from this, so this is high school, going to William and Mary, and then finally at the end. So I probably should have done it the reverse order. But anyways, but you get the point. So so the reason why I bring up that anecdote is because I feel the Criterion Collection is, what you're seeing is the top 2% of cinema. And by seeing a whole bunch of films that are considered the top 2% of cinema, and I'm using it in a very broad term, and this is covering all kinds of genres and a lot of different countries and a lot of different directors and styles and approaches and aesthetics, all that. This Criterion Collection is the top 2% of cinema, which means there are ultimately going to be some titles that you're going to be least impressed by than others, but they still are in the top 2%. I would take a bad Criterion Collection, or I would take a title from the Criterion Collection where I feel some ambivalence over something that is hailed as this great thing but ends up being just this fad. I certainly prefer Criterion titles over most of what's playing in the multiplex. So the point of all this is that I shouldn't feel bad that I sometimes don't feel as enthusiastic about certain titles. Because again, I own a lot, and in doing these reviews, I've gone through a lot of films. So again, I think I'm kind of feel at the point where I feel a little bit at a burnout stage, but I still enjoy them, and that's the reason why I've been doing these whole reviews, is because I certainly in general I love film. I love cinema. I love the what it can do, the possibilities, and the places it can take you, and doing these is sort of my way of sharing what I've explored, and tell you a little bit about what I've explored, and share with all of you what I think about particular films and what I think about film in general. So that's considered great. So it shouldn't matter what I think about in a particular title. So yeah. Again, I recommend it as another suspense thriller film, a really good one, and certainly one that's not what if you want to go beyond like seeing something from Hitchcock. And again, not to take away from Hitchcock, he's certainly a master filmmaker that's worthy of any and all intention and time. But if you want to see more like Hitchcock, or if you want to see more, and I also think of Clouseau as well. So if you want to think of another director that does suspense thrillers or did a suspense thriller really well, see this film. I think Bardem has done other things as well, but I'm just talking about this specific film. And again, I think of it as a nice little commentary about the nature of morality, and so it plays to convention, but it also does a little bit more, so it makes it a little bit more interesting. Not completely wowed by it, but at the same time, this is top 2%. This is top 2% of cinema. So there you go. Death of a Cyclist. And until next time, take care.